And so this group gathered. We had never met each other before, and the NSF expert who was running the panel was quick to give us the rules. We did our work, and the proposals were strange. I mean, many of them were photographers. So then the argument became, well, is this truly art photography, or is this just pretty postcard photography? This was a big distinction. Art or postcard? Art or postcard? And I was really fond of several of the postcard artists, but they were doomed. They were not going to get sent. There was a proposal from someone to be a sound artist that was going to record the sounds of whales, penguins, skuas, ventilators, bulldozers, generators. In essence, all of the sounds that you could hear around McMurdo, Antarctica, and turn them into musical pieces because of their different tones and timbres. So that even Ralph Vaughan Williams' Antarctic Symphony was going to be perfectly reproduced by an orchestra of local sounds, for instance. That one did pretty well. There was a person that wanted to do feng shui at the South Pole. The South Pole had never been feng shui. And so the argument became, well, is feng shui an art? Is it an art, or is it really a science with an invisible paradigm? There was somebody who proposed to make a model of Mount Erebus, which is the mountain, the volcano, active volcano right behind McMurdo. And it's like any other volcano on the planet, a gigantic cone. And this model was going to be at 1/1000th scale. And it was one of the scientists in the room who very quickly calculated, the artists were very impressed by this, that he calculated that this scale, 1 to 1,000 scale model of Erebus was nevertheless going to weigh 2 or 3 tons and would never be able to be moved out of Antarctica because of its weight. So that one didn't do very well. Somebody wanted to do a Broadway musical about Scott's march to the South Pole. That one didn't do very well. And there was one who wanted, an artist who wanted to build snowmen around Antarctica, especially around McMurdo. Just classic snowmen like you see in the cartoons or like you see in the Midwest, or even more artistic ones. And these would, since it never gets above freezing, they would be there forever as ice sculptures. I gave that one a 4.75. I'm not sure if every person got to go down there. So this whole process, although funny, was also interesting enough that I asked the NSF people, could I please sit in on some of the science panels to see how it worked for the sciences proper. So I spent then an extra few days at NSF just as a shadow figure in the corner watching the panels working on the sciences. Particularly, these were mostly the biological sciences and a little bit of physics, but mostly biology. Well, I must say this was a very different experience. It was like going from kids playing the board game life to people engaged in real life. Because this was real money, people's real work, and the jobs were on the line. And the experts who had brought in were amongst the handful of people. In any given edge of a discipline in the sciences, there are probably somewhere between 20 to 100 people who are working the edge, who are understanding the edge. And so the person at NSF knows these people and brings in a sample of them to judge the grant proposals. And the discussions then, although very quick, were very sophisticated and almost impossible to understand on the technical level because a new language is being invented to describe the new discoveries being made. There would be, in the discussions of a grant proposal, would be sudden bursts of theoretical conversation about philosophy of science, about history of science, rapid, telegraphic, and 20 seconds long arguments about whether this particular experiment should be funded because it would do something or other that had not just a technical impact, but even a philosophical impact in the work of science. And I must say that also revealed there is what you might call a real epistemological modesty. I doubt there is any scientist working at the edge of their field who would be comfortable making any assertions about how science works or what it is encountering. They are not sure enough of themselves because of the strange fluidity of their work itself, to be able to make such broad assertions that someone like someone like I make all the time, for instance. And also, like, for instance, this notion that there are laws of nature. I don't think any scientist in the room would have ever agreed to the phrase laws of nature. What does that mean? And there's a great phrase out of the particle physics by one of Heisenberg's associates, the startling adherence of natural phenomenon to mathematics of unusual subtlety and difficulty. And this is what I think they would agree with, that there is an adherence of natural phenomenon to mathematics, but they don't know what that means, and nor are they confident that there is rules involved, that the mathematics is driving the phenomenon would be something that would be way farther than they would be willing to speculate. And so that instead of talking about laws of nature, I think that the working scientific community would be more comfortable with the phrase adherences, inexplicable adherences that they might not be able to explain them, but you can use quantum mechanics to make calculations of the physical world that will be accurate to 1 in a trillion. So 1 part in a trillion accuracy in these adherences of these mathematics. And yet, no confidence whatsoever that there are any laws involved. It's just an adherence. Also in the panel, there's this lovely phrase that often came up. The lead reporter on a grant proposal would say, "I'm afraid this one only deserves limited discussion." And then everybody would say, "Oh, good," and they would throw that one aside. That sentence alone was the limited discussion involved. And those proposals were simply not in the game whatsoever and not worth their time because they had so much time. And then also for the odd proposals, and this is interesting for people who are aware of Kuhn's paradigm model, a sort of model of modeling that there's normal science and then there's inexplicable results that causes a paradigm shift and a little scientific revolution. Well, this is a very good model of models, but NSF, being aware of this, when they got proposals that were odd but were clearly not deserving of limited discussion, were sometimes forwarded on to the oddball panel. So it wouldn't even be that panel that decided, but some panel that was more capable of handling something that was coming from out of the fields paradigm. And so they are not just rejected. There is not a monolithic normal science that says, "Oh, we can't deal with this." Science's methodology has been evolving as they got past their moment of hubris and the notion that they already had everything figured out. After that fell away, the next thought was, well, how do we make it better? And this reiterative process now includes the incorporation of the odd. And these are even called paradigm busters. Let's send this to the paradigm buster panel and see if they can make something of it. So all this is part of peer review. And peer review is sort of like the jury system. It's nothing extraordinary and nothing inexplicable about peer review, but expert peer review is impressive in this sense. It's one part of a human system. It's part of a government. And science is governing itself, and it therefore is a system of governance. And that governance is interesting because science is conceiving of itself and operating in our world as an alternative, as an alternity. It is an already existing counterforce to the capitalist world order. Existing within it, having to deal with it, having to cope with the idea that the gun is at its head at all times to produce, and yet in that semi-autonomous and subservient position, creating a counterforce government about how things should work that is mappable onto the way that the rest of the world works. And I want to talk a little bit more about this, about how science runs itself that is not like capitalism. And this is where anthropology can help, I think, because there's some kind of gift economy going on. It's not like Mausian gift economy of primitive societies, but nevertheless there's some social credit going on where lots of this work is being done for free. Those people who come to the NSF panels, they're not getting paid for that. Their travel costs will get paid, but they don't get paid. The work that you do to edit a scientific journal, you don't get paid for that. In fact, scientists being the way they are, if you are the editor of a scientific journal and you want to read the journal that you've edited, you still have to subscribe to it. You have to pay to get copies of the journal that you have edited.